Welcome to the Untold Story podcast. Great to have all of you with us. There's so much going on in the world, and we're talking a lot about it on the story and, of course, on the podcast this week. But I wanted to invite a friend to the show, Howie Kurtz, who you all know very well, one of the strongest voices in the coverage of media and politics for decades, Washington Post, all over the place, Fox News, of course, where you have known and loved him for many years, the Daily Beast, Newsweek. So he really has a deep understanding of the media landscape, the political landscape. So, Howie, it's great to have you with me today. Thanks for joining me.
I love podcasts, so great to be here, Martha.
Great to have you. So it's very interesting to me that the sort of changes that we've started to see in what many refer to as the mainstream media dynamic, the broadcast networks. You know, it started with a bit of a shakeup in late night. We saw the changes made around Stephen Colbert's show, which will be on until May. And then Jimmy Kimmel was pulled from the air for a short time over his comments about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We've seen changes at the anchor desks at the major networks over the past couple of years that have been pretty significant. And then we heard the announcement that Bari Weiss, who had left the New York Times several years back, started the very successful newsletter, podcast, app, The Free Press, now brought over to CBS News under the Ellisons, to be the president of CBS News. And it begs the question, is mainstream media waking up to covering the entire country and lots of political discourse, whether it be on the right and the left? Is that what we're seeing happening here? Are they giving it a go?
Well, they're not waking up quickly enough because obviously a lot of the action has moved online, has moved to podcasts, has moved to this a new environment that we're all facing. And Bari Weiss, by the way, is getting attacked by these left-wing bozos as if she's some kind of right-wing tool. In fact, she describes herself, I interviewed her this year, and she described herself to me as a consistently liberal Jewish lesbian from Pittsburgh. And she confirmed to me that when Donald Trump was elected, in 2016, she sobbed at her desk. But she says in the first term, she liked some of his policies. And so it's not, democracy dies in darkness and so forth. But I do have to say, she's been the editor-in-chief of CBS News for 3 days now. What has she really accomplished? I mean, it's kind of silly that she's getting all of this flack online when she's just started this new job.
But what does it tell you that David Ellison, who is, a real media power broker these days, the son of Larry Ellison, is making this move, that he put Bari Weiss at the top of CBS News, and as you point out, much to the disgruntlement of some of the old guard at CBS who fear that he is bringing in someone who is, quote, anti-woke and wants to change the culture. And I ask you that in the broader lens of what you mentioned before. Is it too late to make these kinds of changes at CBS?
Well, not when you have new owners. And look, the old CBS was not doing all that well because, of course, you had the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris, which led to the Trump lawsuit, which led to what many people saw as caving to President Trump with a $16 million settlement. So I think what the Ellisons, look, you spent $8 billion, you're entitled to do some adjustments. And I think the goal here by the Ellisons, who, by the way, also might end up owning CNN, they've got a lot of money, is to change the way news is delivered and not just do things the way the old guard did. Because let's face it, a lot of people, I don't necessarily agree with this, but the reality is a lot of people want to see their views reinforced. And if Bari Weiss can bring a fresh take as somebody who built this organization from scratch, it's really quite amazing. And she can sort of push it more toward the center. I think there are a lot of people out there who think that the networks are just consistently too liberal. That might be a refreshing development. But at least let's withhold judgment till she's had the job a couple of weeks. But I do think, since I know her a little bit, and in fact, she was in Washington the other day, and I went to a show that she did here. She is very smart, very talented, and just has some views that are a little to the right, but that is unacceptable, for people who just want everything to be as far left as they can push it.
So, it's very interesting because when you look at the history of Fox News, that is something that the founders of Fox News understood more than 25 years ago, that there was a broad audience in America and that there was a big gap in terms of who was being served and spoken to in the broader media spectrum. They saw, I think every successful business in America sees a void and understands that there's a need and steps into it, which of course, Rupert Murdoch and everyone else involved did an amazing job of accomplishing. So I find it very interesting that there are these moves afoot to sort of see if there's more room in that part of the landscape. And as you point out, many people, 20% of Americans get their news from TikTok now, adults. So the world has changed dramatically. But you mentioned something else. You said it's possible that the Ellisons may also end up owning CNN. So what happens if that goes through, Howie?
Well, in this regulatory environment, I don't think that would be challenged. Certainly people would raise questions about, wait, they just took over CBS, now they own CNN. They have a lot of money, and that enables them to try to change the landscape. But I'm glad you mentioned TikTok, because it just underscores how much the landscape has changed. Look, I'm old enough to remember when there were basically 3 networks and you watched it in black and white. But that means that your choices were limited. Well, now everybody's got a choice. And I love the fact that a lot of news is made on podcasts, maybe because people, the guests that is, you don't have to hit a commercial break after 7 minutes, feel more relaxed and to say things that are on their mind. I just also think that clearly there was a hole in the market that many mainstream or lamestream, as some people put it, media just did not see. That Rupert Murdoch saw, that Roger Ailes saw, where people who were either more conservative or at least somewhat to the right felt ignored. And we saw it, of course, with Late Night, with Colbert and Kimmel basically writing off half the country, especially in the Trump era, in order to bash the president. So I think all those things have changed, and anybody who doesn't recognize that it's a different playing field now, maybe an entirely different sport, so to speak, had better get with the program.
I think there's a question about whether or not we're seeing a sea change in terms of the business decisions that are being made by the various media giants, whether it's CBS or CNN. You talked about Late Night. So it used to be when I was growing up that there were basically three strong late night TV shows. Everybody who could stay up late enough watched them. There were 3 evening news broadcasts, and everybody watched those to find out what was going on in the world. So I'm curious, we already see that CBS is dropping the model of the late night TV show. Are they all going to go away? And I would point out that the most successful among them is here at Fox on the Gutfeld show. Then you have the 6 o'clock news hour, where you have Bret Baron's Special Report really being the marquee evening news program these days. I think it's very safe to say in terms of the interviews that he gets and the news that he makes. So is the model, it's not broken here at Fox in terms of those two entities, but I don't know if the networks can be where they were in terms of having that marquee spot in 6 o'clock news or late night ever again. What do you think about that?
It's an intriguing question because they still have an audience of millions, but it's a much older audience. And I think that the thing is that we now are all awash in social media. And that's a healthy thing. It also means it's unmediated.
I don't know if it's a healthy thing, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with social media because, as you know, a lot of people post a lot of garbage. It's not true, misinformation, disinformation, and so forth. At the same time, all these people who used to write letters to the editor in crayon that didn't get published, all of them now have a voice. And sometimes they build up a following just because they have something to say, even though they didn't go to journalism school, they didn't get the training. So it is really, why is there an hour at 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night? It goes back to the days when everything moved slower and you'd come home from work and you'd watch it. But these days, everything moves at lightning speed. Whether it's Gaza peace negotiations or the shutdown, the news changes, every 15 minutes, every hour. I often feel like, I leave the room, I come back, and the world has changed. If you look at the feed on X, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. And so anybody who doesn't recognize that this is a dramatically different landscape than even 5 years ago is going to get left behind. So that's why I say you've got to recognize that it's not a monopoly anymore. It's not 3 networks. It's not 3 big newspapers or 3 big magazines. It's a whole country. And if the mainstream media, which people now say with a little bit of disdain, doesn't quickly adapt to that, they're going to continue to lose influence.
Well, you see the bosses at the other networks kind of starting to figure that out. I think it remains to be seen what happens at ABC, and MSNBC, of course, is no longer part of NBC. And you see these changes happening at CBS. Do you think that, just giving the Bari Weiss example, can she turn around CBS News? And do you think that you'll see different people in the anchor chairs in the evening news and potentially on the morning show, the 2 biggest properties that they have?
Well, CBS Evening News has been number 3 in a 3 organization race for a long, long time. So it would be something of a miracle if she can wave a wand and bring those ratings up, but maybe she'll decide.
That's the job before her, right? I mean, that's the job.
It's a big challenge. It is a huge challenge. And part of this is going to be how much resistance does she get from the old guard at CBS News. And I can understand them being nervous, a new person coming in who didn't rise through the traditional method. And some people are saying, well, she's never been a reporter. There have been other presidents of CBS News that have not been reporters. And so if she finds herself in a tug of war, it will be harder to change not just CBS News, but the CBS Morning Show and CBS Sunday Morning and all of those programs. 60 Minutes doesn't have quite the stellar reputation that it used to have. If the people who work there say, look, I'm lucky to have a job here, I'm willing to work with Bari Weiss and others, and then I think she's got a shot. It could end up being very frustrating for her, but I think it's an exciting thing to watch that somebody who created out of scratch the site, the Free Press, which has a wide diversity of views, and then is able to sell it for $150 million. I think some of Bari Weiss's detractors are just kind of jealous that she's got that big payday, but she works very hard, and that's one of the reasons it's paid off. But again, going up against a place that has been set in its ways for a long time, perhaps more than any of the other networks, it's not going to be a piece of cake.
Yeah, well, I think there might be a book in here somewhere, Howie. So we'll be watching all of this very closely, the sea change in the media landscape and whether or not these sort of marquee names and properties can be new again, or whether or not they are ready for the dustbin is the big question out there. So we will see. Howie, thank you very much. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you to Howie Kurtz, and thank you for listening to The Untold Story. Interesting subject. Would love to know what you think about it. So send me a message. Either you can DM me on Instagram at Martha MacCallum, or you can reach out to me on X at Martha MacCallum. We'll see where the media is headed. We'll see you next time.